Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today on a special morning to start the day at the International School of Indiana. Welcome to our next monthly Heritage Panel. We do these every month, and this month is really special because of Veterans Day. And the month of November, we celebrate Veterans Day, and in particular at ISI this month, we're focusing on public service, both in the United States and internationally. So we have 4 panelists, one who will be joining us in just a few minutes, and a moderator, and all 5 of these people have dedicated their lives to serve others. And it's extremely powerful, the choices they've made with their lives for the well-being of other people and for all of us. Many of the liberties and freedoms we enjoy today by being at this school, by being able to go to a school of our choice, by being able to study in the way that we do, by women and men being able to participate in a school equally. Many of these things are because of the service of veterans and people who have served in the public areas and dedicated their lives to that. So I know I feel really honored by the fact that these 5 people have chosen to help all of us live with the opportunities that we live. And so I'm very, very grateful for these people and the many who serve in the United States and abroad. So I'm not going to introduce the panelists or the moderator. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, because the most important piece of why we do these panels is to celebrate our diversity and to connect as humans. The International School of Indiana is the only school in all of Indiana that has a mission of truly creating interconnected, international, globally minded, diverse students. And so this is the only place in Indiana where we really can come together with the same mission of realizing that we are all so different, and yet we are so deeply connected as human beings. And so the first pillar of our strategic plan is community culture. And building community culture starts with conversations like the conversations that we'll have today. So students, thank you for being here and for your attentiveness. There will be some time at the end for questions. So students, if you have any questions, feel free to think about those questions. And parents, of course, please join in and participate as well. So thank you so much to our panelists, and I'm gonna hand it over to Andrea Richter-Gary, our moderator. Thank you, Andrea.
Great, thank you so much, Liz, and thank you all for being here today, and for you all for your interest in listening. So I am Andrea Richter-Gary. I have 4 kids here at ISI, so Beckett, Blaze, Margot, and Gretchen, all in the Mandarin track. As far as my service background, I was always interested in international affairs, so that was a lot of things I studied in college, political science, global studies, and then actually went to the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown, along with Jill, actually. And that was a more specific training in foreign policy and the other things that would prepare you for that. And right after that, I had a job at the State Department, which you'll hear a little bit more about today. So that is the organization that has the Foreign Service, the diplomats, the people that live at embassies, or the people that live in DC, who are really the foreign policy arm of the US government. And then at the end of my service, I finished up at the White House. I was advanced lead to President Barack Obama. So I would travel, whether it was him getting a cup of coffee down the street or all the way to countries like Vietnam, and lead a team of about 300 people, press, security, planning every single moment of the day to make sure that our foreign policy agenda and that trip or mission was able to meet our foreign policy objectives. So I finished that in 2017 and moved here, and now we're adopted Hoosiers and really happy to be in the ISI community. April, over to you.
Thank you so much. My name is April Wood. I am a former service member, Air Force, for 6 years. I joined the Air Force right out of high school, mostly for money for college, honestly. I went in also for a little bit of adventure. I wanted to travel. I always had the travel bug. So joined right after high school to get the GI Bill so I could pay for my college degree. I was very fortunate to be able to have a few great duty assignments, the last of which was with the Air Force Thunderbirds. We call it the Air Demonstration Team, or the Thunderbirds, which does the air shows that you might have seen. Has anybody seen an air show? Blue Angels or Thunderbirds? Anyway, so I was fortunate to be on the Air Force Thunderbirds for 3 years. I got out of the Air Force just after that assignment to finish my degree and go on into sports PR. And then currently I am partner in a couple of businesses, and I I'm a very happy mother to 4, one of which is my son Quincy, who's 3rd grade in the Spanish track here. So thank you. I will say I want to thank Liz and the ISI staff for putting this on and for acknowledging veterans and service people in the ISI community. I think it's important, and we were happy to speak on the panel, just in that honor. Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Ashley Gary, adopted Hoosier, as Andrea said, proud father of 4 kids in the Mandarin track, the same ones that she talked about. We share them together, but my story is I went to the Citadel. I graduated in 2003, was in college trying to decide whether or not I was going to go into the military or whether I was going to pursue other things. I actually kind of ended up in college because it was free. I looked at it, but I wasn't sure it was for me. I had done some work in my town for small businesses and on political campaigns, and none of that really seemed like I had to go to college to be successful in that, and that's really where I saw my life headed. But when I applied and I saw kind of what it could do for me, and I thought, why not give it a shot and see? I ended up being there, liking college, wanting to go to law school, but then deciding that this was a good opportunity to take a break and do some service. I come not from military fam. I come from a military family, even though I wasn't necessarily raised in the military lifestyle. So I was raised by my single grandmother in a small town in South Carolina. But my mom was a Gulf War vet, her father was a Vietnam War vet, and her grandfather was a World War I veteran. So service came naturally to me. It was something I was really comfortable with and understood. So I decided in 2001 that I would make that decision to serve, and that was early September 2001. And so September 11th came and the world very much changed, and so that set me off on a different trajectory. I graduated, I was an Army officer with the 3rd Infantry Division out of Savannah, Georgia, and deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom 3 in 2004 to 2006. I came back from that and then went to law school at Cornell, and then practiced in DC after that. And I guess I should say, after my service before law school, I supported Iraq reconstruction efforts at Department of State and Defense.
Hi, everybody. I want to echo the thanks for having this panel today and kind of shining the light on some different aspects of international public service. And it's wonderful to be among you all, especially our uniformed veterans or former veterans in uniform. Current veterans, formerly in uniform. My name is Jill Strong. I have 2 children at ISI. Winston, who's a 3rd grader in the French track, and Hugo is a 1st grader in the French track. But my first encounter with international school was actually in the aughts when I was looking for a job in the international sector and came and taught as a substitute teacher for a short time here. So I have always admired this school and community and said if I ever come back to Indianapolis, my kids are going to ISI. So my portion of the public service part of my career was at the Department of State. I worked there from 2010 to 2017. I was a civil service officer based in Washington, D.C. So I wasn't, as Andrea alluded to, there's a part of the State Department called the Foreign Service that is comprised of people who are based in different embassies and missions across the world for 1 to 3 year periods, often with their families, sometimes unaccompanied. And then there's a lot of subject area experts who are based in Washington. So I was one of those. I worked in the areas of United Nations policy, doing work with the UN Security Council, but most of my time was spent working on refugee and humanitarian policy. So a refugee is someone who forced to flee their country because of a well-founded fear of persecution on a variety of criteria. And so my role was to help support refugee policy abroad, and not kind of the part of refugee policy where people move to the United States. I also, during my time, had details to the U.S. Embassy in Mauritania and West Africa, and the U.S. Consulate General in Frankfurt, Germany, and I was also detailed to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland, where the U.S. delegation kind of helped shine lights on human rights abuses around the world. My calling, what I thought I wanted to do after I graduated from Indiana University and then Georgetown with Andrea, I always thought I wanted to work at the United Nations. I think it's a dream of a lot of folks who are interested in the international sphere to do that, and that's kind of what I was angling for. But I kind of by dumb luck was offered an internship at the Department of State, and I didn't see myself kind of working for the US government at the time, but it really turned out to be such a rewarding part of my career. Currently, I'm the Chief Partnerships Officer at Building Tomorrow, a nonprofit that was born here in Indianapolis that's working on literacy and numeracy for kids in East Africa.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and just bringing your wealth of experience to the discussion today. Since we did kind of start with the bios and are aiming for this human-to-human connection, were there any components that you just went through of your identity, your upbringing, or even the citizenship or nationality you're coming from that you felt really drew you to public service or kind of put you in that direction? I think we'll start with April.
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. I grew up in West Texas in poverty. My dad left high school at 17 to join the Army during the Vietnam War, which kind of tells a lot about what was going on in his life at that time. But my parents, my mom had epilepsy all of my years growing up until I was an adult, honestly. And so my older brother and I'm second of 4. My older brother and I started working at a very young age, in 5th grade, honestly, to help my parents. We would mow yards. We would do any odd work that we could get, and just to help my parents pay bills. And at probably about 7th grade, I found a love for French, foreign language, and I knew I wanted to travel as a youngster because of stories my dad had told me from when he was in the Army. But I also knew that I needed to kind of break out of the track that my family was in. Wasn't even necessarily to be the first in my family to graduate from college or to go to college. It wasn't that reason, which I ended up being, but I just knew that I had to be the first to kind of break out of the cycle that we were in. So when I got into, I was very good in school. I made great grades, did everything I needed to, and didn't end up getting the scholarships that I hoped for college. I spoke to an Air Force recruiter when I was a junior, so pay attention. If any of you are thinking about going into the military at this young age, I spoke to the recruiter as a junior, and they told me at that time that I was too late. So I missed my Air Force Academy opportunity. For some reason, I was bent, you know, I was surely gonna go to the Air Force, for whatever reason. But, so then I just decided I was not gonna have a lot of bills. I was gonna rack up a lot of bills, college bills, and be in debt when I got out. So I joined the Air Force as an enlisted person out of high school, which actually turned out to be one of the coolest things that I've ever done. Just an amazing, I had an amazing 6-year ride and got to do some really incredible things. And actually it's how I eventually ended up meeting my husband, who's the guy who just walked in. But yes, so really just to get out of the cycle of poverty that my family was in.
No, thank you so much for sharing that, April. And we'll take just one moment before we head to Ashley next for this question, but just to welcome Jeff Wood to the panel. And Jeff, we asked about maybe how your components of your identity or upbringing shaped your desire or interest in serving. So when we get to you, if you could share a little bit about that with perhaps just a few sentences on your bio and your service background, that would be great. But over to Ashley next.
Yeah, no, I thank you for your story, because I feel that feels very similar to mine. So I understand, you know, growing up that way and working your way out of it, and I think that gives you a sense for service and hard work. So I definitely think that kind of that component of my upbringing and personality led me towards service. I think even at a young age, I've felt that our country and others similarly situated are at a special place and a point in time. And we have an obligation with the resources we have and the strength and the power we have to be advocates for democracy and self-governance and self-reliance. And that we need to go to places where people are longing for that. And sometimes that is with our money, sometimes that is with our material, and sometimes that is with our military. The military was the part of that spoke to me. But just that longing to be a part of that tool and that mission to go out and spread this democracy and this idea that people should be able to self-govern themselves has always spoken to me, and that was kind of only brought out the older I got and the more I learned about these different places in college. And so that really drove me toward military service.
Yeah, for me, I think like I said, I never really had this idea in the back of my mind that I was going to work for the U.S. government. But I am the grandchild of 2 Polish immigrants who fled Poland after the Second World War and couldn't go back, so themselves were political refugees. And I think that kind of ingrained in me this interest in the world outside of the U.S. And I think I've always had this altruism inside of me and a need to help people. So how that kind of manifested is similar to what Ashley was saying, but I think for me it was always an interest in kind of basic human rights and meeting basic human needs of people who might not be looked after by their governments. So yeah, I would say, again, I always thought I was gonna do something kind of working for a multilateral body like the United Nations or something like that. But what really I think I realized is that, you know, as the most powerful country in the world, kind of being at the forefront of global issues, working in the U.S. government was just as effective a path. But yeah, I'm in awe of both of you for your stories and how you grew into your career. So and kudos to both of you. Over to you, Jeff.
I'm Jeff Wood, April's husband. I came upon the military. I guess my father was a pilot, and his love of flying, I think, influenced me. He was colorblind, so he could not get in the Air Force. He tried everything he could. He tried to go to Canada, tried to cheat on tests. Nothing worked. And so he ended up in post-World War II Germany, serving in the Army Corps of Engineers, and I think that really put some structure, and he had a kind of a poor upbringing, and that put a lot of structure in his life, and he became a great entrepreneur. But I caught that aviation bug, and through his flying and his acquaintances with military officers, I found out that the best kept secret in the military was the Air National Guard. And I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and if I found the right guard unit, then I knew I wanted to fly fighters, and if they had fighters, they hired me. As long as I did well in training, I'd get to do that. So that's right about when Top Gun came out, so it took me a couple of years, but eventually I got there, and best decision of my life.
Great, thank you so much. I think each of you touched in different ways on some of the intrinsic drivers and things that motivated you for service. And I think people often associate public service as being mission-driven work that then, bring a level of satisfaction. So I wanted to understand if that was your kind of experience in doing this type of work. And I would really love if you could share, if so, maybe a moment or a memory that really crystallized that ability to connect and kind of serve and support other people. I'm going to start with Jill for this one.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a satisfying part of my career working at State. I really woke up every day feeling like I was doing something that was benefiting kind of humankind. I mean, what I was doing was such a tiny, tiny part of kind of the whole equation, but I did feel like that it was doing something additive. And at that time in particular, I would say the U.S. was really a global leader on international humanitarian policy. We were the world's largest donor to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees and other UN agencies, and part of my role was making sure the U.S. was a good steward of those funds going to international organizations and NGOs. And so in doing so I got to see some really cool parts of U.S. foreign policy when two countries were coming into conflict and there were flows of refugees, new flows of refugees, and trying to make sure that we were doing the best we could to make sure people could arrive safely, have a safe haven, and that countries were meeting their international legal obligations and so forth. But one kind of highlight of the role as kind of a policy generalist or a kind of a geographic generalist, I wasn't responsible for one geographic area, was I got to go to so many parts of sub-Saharan Africa specifically, but also Europe to kind of do these monitoring missions to make sure that US funds were being well spent and that our policies were kind of in line with US national interests. And so one kind of moment that stands out for me was I traveled to Turkey in 2015, just across, just a couple miles from the Syrian border, across from Aleppo, Syria, where tens of thousands of refugees were flowing, or people were flowing over the border and becoming refugees in Turkey. And I was there for a couple of weeks monitoring programming that was going to NGOs, non-governmental organizations that were providing food and shelter and things to these people who were just freshly arrived from Syria. And one, my favorite and also just kind of harrowing moments was we visited a center for children and their mothers. It was mostly mothers. 75% of the world's refugees are women and children. But we visited this center that the US was helping fund to provide therapeutic activities and mental health programming for these children who had witnessed just the most horrific things, and were completely, you know, in a new country, new place, and thrown into just a completely different kind of life. And I spoke with this woman who, a mother of 2 or 3, I can't remember, she had 2 or 3 children. And I asked her, part of our job in kind of monitoring US funding was learning about, you know, obviously we wanted to learn what people's experiences were. We wanted to connect the assistance we were giving to people's stories and ground truthing things. And so I, you know, got to speak to so many just amazing heroes, really just heroes. But this woman just told her story about how they just fled Aleppo, showed me pictures on her phone of her brother who had been injured, kind of a traumatic injury with cluster bombs, had struck his limbs, and unspeakable crimes had happened to her family members, and her husband was in jail in Syria, and this woman was so freshly kind of arrived and knew, and was attempting to tell her story and let the world know what was happening. And her children were playing and with other children, and they were, you know, just being kids. But it was just a moment of just a ton of humility. We are very lucky, many of us who are able to provide for ourselves, and we live each day in safety. But also it was a moment of great pride, because I felt as an American at that moment that we were doing something so powerful and so important to help these families get back on their feet, and help children work through some just incredibly difficult moments in their lives. So that for me really stood out.
Jill, thank you so much for sharing that. We really appreciate it. Ashley, please.
Sure, I'd say, you know, absolutely yes. So feeling very mission-oriented and mission-driven. Something we say in the Army is mission first and people always, and that has a way of really binding you and bonding you with the people you serve with. I had the opportunity to be roommates with 2 of my best friends in the world while I was in the military. One is godfather to Beckett, and one is godfather to Blaze. So we're best friends to this day. And I think if I think of 2 moments that stand out to me around mission, you know, one is involving them, is that we were roommates, we were training together, we were traveling during various training, and then the order comes down that you were going to go to Iraq in about 6 months' time. And so it wasn't clear who was going to go or every unit was going to go, but then we knew we were. And so boys, we're in it together now. So the mission brought us together and made us really believe in each other and kind of understand how much we could rely on each other. At the same time, being on the ground, I'm taken back to Crete, and we were in charge of safety and security and infrastructure operations in the city of Tikrit in north central Iraq and a lot of the suburbs around that. And so what you're doing as part of that is you're doing raids, of course, right? You're arresting the bad guys. You're trying to get money out there in the community to build up infrastructure and give city councils the support they need so they can be more safe and secure from those bad guys who are out there. And I remember this one particular raid coming across this building that was locked. And so we enter this building, and wouldn't you believe it, it's a basically state-of-the-art hospital, a smaller one, but everyone in this town would have to go about 12 or 15 miles to get to a hospital, and there was no hospital for this town or the surrounding areas. And when I asked about that, people said, well, that's Saddam's hospital. But not anymore, because there's a new day and it's your hospital. So how do we get this open so that you can use it? And so we spent the next 3 or 4 months working with the various health ministries to say, we need to turn this over to the people. We need to get it staffed, and we need to get it stocked. And in 3 months' time, we opened that for that village and for the surrounding area. And for us, it was a big win because we were there to do much more than just the fighting that people assume on TV. We were there to help turn this country around. and that we got to really live out our mission that day and see people really take their country back.
Thank you so much. Jeff.
I guess my experience, I'll focus on my experience with the Air Force Thunderbirds. Similar to the Navy's air demonstration team, the Thunderbirds are the Air Force's. April was also on that team before me, but our mission was to recruit and retain and demonstrate the precision, the power of the Air Force, and it was really a great opportunity to travel around the country and almost the world, because 9/11 happened right before our Pacific tour was about to happen. But it was very rewarding. My job, I'm an F-16 pilot by trade, but my job was to be the narrator and advanced pilot. So I would go out before the team to every show site and meet with the people there and tell them what we needed, and then maybe give a news reporter a ride in the backseat of my airplane, or and then I would narrate the show, which I hate public speaking, and I said next thing I know I'm speaking in front of 1 million people on the beach in Florida. But it was great for personal growth, as well as that team. You know, I played sports growing up, but the team of 12 officers and, I don't know, April, how many, 100 enlisted folks? Traveling around the country, and you know, as pilots, we trust each other with our lives, and it was just a fantastic experience, and it was a proud moment to represent our Air Force and our country.
Great, thank you.
Well, just quickly, I know we might be going on, but as far as giving back and my service and how it drove me to continue serving, luckily, as I said, I was able to travel a lot in my 6 years in the Air Force, and you see a lot of different people, you see a lot of different cultures, you experience a lot of different things, and you see, I was fortunate to do a European tour with the Thunderbirds, and just to see children who probably, one was in Czech Republic, an air show we did in Czech Republic, just children out there who are just so overjoyed with what you're providing them, and just seeing things that they could never have seen before. Most likely they've never seen anything like the show that we were putting on, or been up close to airplanes, or been able to speak to pilots or crew members, or so it really made me feel like, it made me recognize that honoring service people, for sure, continuing work as we go on in life is so important, like, because we are very blessed. We're all very blessed to live in this country. We have far more opportunities than so many other people in countries that I toured, and I'm sure obviously with you all as well. But just reinforce that service above self is just ongoingly so important, and it's kind of driven me in my life, like how I grew up, and my service career has driven me to continue my service. Quincy and I volunteer at Shepherd Community Center. I've been on the board for Starfish Initiative, we have a family foundation, just things that I continue to notice and realize, like, you have service to others is so important in your lifetime, and to continue.
Thank you so much, April, and I'm going to pick up on that just for one last quick question, but just to let our audience members know, I'm going to then turn it over to you all, so please get those questions flowing, and we'll call on you in just a minute. So April, I really enjoyed that example of talking about, you know, kids maybe from a different country seeing something that was, one, just amazing and represented the U.S. to them. and we look at the background of the international school, we're preparing our kids to be able to work with people across cultures, to understand, find commonality in those values. So if any of our panelists, I would love it if there was, again, maybe just a quick story or example where you felt, it really shaped your perception of different countries or backgrounds, or that you felt like you were really, experiencing that commonality with someone that maybe came from a complete different walk of life than you. I'll start with maybe Jeff for this one, and then we'll work our way down.
Okay. A quick story that comes to mind is just when I spent a year in Korea, in Kunsan, South Korea, and it was a remote destination, so my wife at the time wasn't there, and my kids and my family came over during the holidays, and our squadron kind of sponsored an orphanage nearby, and we brought shoes and clothing and things that they didn't have, but it was just amazing. I brought my kids with me. My oldest daughter's blonde. It was like they had never seen a blonde child before, and they wanted to touch her, and they were so grateful for the shoes and clothing that we brought, and the playtime, and that was just one nice experience I had.
Thank you. Jill?
One experience that stands out for me was when I was based in Mauritania, a country that I think I had to look at, if I'm going to be very honest, I had to look at a map when I was told that that's where I was going to go for a detail. Commonly confused with Mauritius, but it's on the Atlantic coast and south of Western Sahara, north of Senegal, in West Africa. Most of the country is the Sahara Desert, but it's a huge land mass, and just 3 million people live in this entire country. But I was there for a detail, and one trip I got to do was I accompanied a contingent of the U.S. Army actually to the north. So at the time there were and there continue to be terrorist elements in North Africa that have kind of infiltrated different countries, and so the U.S. Army there was a large contingent of AFRICOM military folks, and I got to go with a group of them up to a very historic part of the Sahara Desert, an ancient trading town called Chinguetti, which would be off limits for most American citizens to travel to, and very, very difficult to reach. So we were traveling in a 4x4 across sand dunes and got stuck multiple times. But the first night when we arrived, we were welcomed by the mayor, or the equivalent of the mayor in this town, and there were 5 of us, Americans, but they kind of as a customary thing in Africa when you're visiting as a delegation of sorts is to stop over at the mayor or the local leader's home or office, and let them know why you're there and what you're doing. So this man invited us to his home for dinner, and it was the first time that I had ever eaten on the floor, but we were welcomed to this beautiful dinner of goat and French fries, and we were eating on the floor, and it was, and then this tea, and it was, to me, it just stands out because it was such a different cultural experience than I had ever had, and the warmth, it stood out to me, was just the warmth of this person who was being ever so welcoming to complete strangers. Some of us who, look pretty official utmost folks, but I really encountered a lot of I had just utmost respect for cultures at that point who I think just really welcome outsiders, and offering a meal, breaking bread together is just one of the maybe most generous nods of hospitality that someone can provide. So that just stands out to me. I will say it also is memorable because I got violently ill the next day, and I can no longer eat goat, but I did.
Fair. Ashley, a memory.
Sure. I think I'm just gonna collect all my memories into one. It will sound kind of cliche, but what I learned throughout my travels and my work was that people tend to want the same things in different parts of the world, even though they may go about them differently or look differently or speak different languages. People want to be secure. They want food security. They want the best for their families. They want to be able to provide. And when you show up, they want you to be able to find some commonality with them in how you can help them provide. And a lot of them, they want to be self-reliant. They want to do it themselves. But there's really more commonalities with us all than there are differences. And even the cultures that are different, the commonality there is that people want to be able to preserve their own and protect it and live in it and enrich it. And I enjoy being a part of helping people do that. And then I'll flip it around for the audience, and mostly for the students, but especially for the parents. I think what you've committed yourself to and the way you view the world is mission critical for the type of service we do and the work we do. This is not recruiting pitch, that's not what I mean. But I am just saying
Yes, it is.
that we whether it's civilian or military service, we depend on people like you that can land on the ground, and whether it's because you speak the language or whether it's because you have a worldview that says, I view you the same as me, and let's work together on getting you the things that you need. That's how the whole thing runs. If we can't do that day to day, the mission day to day is whoever that junior person on the ground, what they do or choose not to do, what they can or cannot do, is how all of the big picture stuff happens. The president can set the agenda and Congress can fund it and everything else can happen, but people who go out and can make those types of connections and do the work on the ground, that's how it all comes together.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to open it up to questions. So any of our students or parents, please just raise your hand and we'll call on you. Okay, anyone?
Don't be shy.
Nope, right there. Yes, Alex.
Really loudly. Did you visit the border?
I did not get to. I flew over it, but I didn't get to visit. I did.
How do you fly over the border?
The demilitarized zone is we would do some training up there.
Wait, did you go to Seoul too?
Yes.
Do you like it?
Yeah, it was fun. Big city.
And I think, Ashley, you were in Korea, right, for a little bit as well. And
So temporary duty. Yeah.
temporary duty, yes. And I got to go a couple of times too. So to your question, Alex, I was in the DMZ area where the soldiers from North Korea come and look in the window, and there's a line painted down the kind of diplomatic house where you could have meetings between the two. And yeah, it's phenomenal. Definitely recommend. Any other questions? Beth?
So in the world of service, can you think of any instances where your intent to serve or your mission to serve came into conflict with who it was that you were serving and what they wanted? For an example, just a really simple example, growing up in Eastern Kentucky, my dad and mom provided for my seven girls. And there was a time, it was very hard, and there was a time when a local church came and with very good intentions to serve, put groceries on our porch around the holidays. And I was very little, and I remember my father's reaction, right? He was angry, he was upset, he was angry, he was heartbroken, right? And he took them back with a note that said, thank you, but we don't need it, right? And so that, I didn't understand it until kind of now, but that was a direct, almost assault to hit what he felt was his job, which was a provider of our family. And so that, I've thought of that in my own service over time, and
So I think for any of our panelists who want to take it, just go ahead and give multiple, feel free.
I would say, not in broad strokes, but generally, I think it's fair to say, and it's fair for certain people to feel this way. You're here to help, and we don't want you here. And I think it takes a level of, kind of strategic maturity to work around that and say we're still here to do the work we need to do, but we also should respect people not going in places where we're not wanted. And so how do we work around that? How do we contribute where we can, but then there may be various reasons. It could be cultural norms. It could be we just simply didn't ask for this. And so I think there are times where you're going to come into that kind of conflict, and I think the best way about that is to kind of wrap your head around respecting that, still doing the work, and then maybe people come around to some type of help from you that's more direct.
Great. Anyone else? Otherwise, we'll see if we have. Good. Any other questions? I think I saw a hand over here somewhere. Okay. Oh, yeah, back there.
How long does the training take before you're allowed to go on your first mission?
It's like, yeah, how much you have to train.
Well, it's different for each MOS or specialty that you're in, whichever job you're in. Obviously, it's a lot. Jeff had far more training as a fighter pilot than I did. I was a non-destructive inspection technician, which means I did x-rays and ultrasounds on jets to find cracks and disc bonds. The bearer of bad news, typically. But so for me, as I was enlisted and when I finished my training, in my first duty assignment, I was able to volunteer to go overseas pretty quickly. I was probably in my second year in the Air Force, and I volunteered to go to Turkey, to Incirlik Air Base in Turkey. So it just depends on the mission, and you might be able to speak to it more, but sometimes very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it kind of depends on the job, where you are. As an officer, for me, after graduation, I went to basically officer basic school for about 5 or 6 months. I was in an infantry division, and some infantry is what we call light, so it's a lot of what people see marching. Some are airborne, and they're air assault. You can be in planes or helicopters, and we were mechanized, which is tanks and Bradleys that look like tanks. So I was going to be a Bradley commander, so I went to Bradley Commander School. And then from Bradley Commander School, I went to my unit, and then I spent about 6 months to a year training with my unit before we deployed. But that's a really kind of almost perfect timeline. It just happened to work out that way for me. There were people who showed up to the unit after me, and maybe they got 3 months before they could go. So there's some, basic schools and training that you'll get, I think, in before you go to your unit. But then once you're there, you may go out on the mission at whatever the timeline is, and you may be in theater or in country and go out, the next week. So it just all depends.
And Jill, if you could talk a little bit about how civilian service still has preparation, but maybe can be a little bit different. Would love to.
Yeah,
Your thoughts
so
on that?
obviously it's a lot, the technicalities are so very different for civilian. I will say, I'll just give you my experience first and then maybe a different experience, but I was welcomed into the job at the State Department, I think the day after the Haiti earthquake of 2010, and was drinking out of a fire hose, put on a computer, and was helping put together a policy paper for the UN Security Council. I had no on-the-job training, right? I had none. I had writing skills and some critical thinking, but it was drinking out of a fire hose. And then kind of but I will say that the training kind of came after and was continuous through. So the State Department has an institute called the Foreign Service Institute where they provide extensive language courses. People can go and kind of immerse themselves, like at ISI, in a language for 6 months to a year before being posted to a mission abroad. They have training on specific areas of expertise, leadership training, etc. So I did receive some of that training kind of as I went through the job, but a lot of it was really just all hands on deck. We have a crisis. We are gonna, we expect that you got here for a reason, so we're gonna put you right into it. Yeah, that was my experience.
Right. I think any, Mana?
What specifically, like, drew you guys to joining your specific branches of the armed military?
So to hear that, what drove you to your specific branch of the military or service?
I'll say quickly that I grew up, my parents would take us to Dyess Air Force Base in Texas, West Texas, for air shows. It was just one thing that they could afford, and it was about every other year we'd see the Thunderbirds demonstration, and just around the planes. I've always been, I guess since then, I've been an avionic buff. I thought maybe at one point I wanted to be a pilot, but yeah, I just think that it really, there was no other choice for me. For whatever reason, it was like, that was in my heart, maybe because my parents took me to those air shows, but I knew that that was the only thing for me.
Yeah, I think for me, we were more of an Army family, so we had more of a slant toward that. That's where our veterans were from, and I felt like that was going to give me the most varied possibilities of travel and the different jobs that I was interested in. And then I don't know if the Army still does it this way, so this may not be correct, but we used to divide it into things like combat arms, so it was artillery, infantry, armor, tanks, and then combat support would be like military police and those types of jobs, and then combat service support, medical corps, and those types of jobs. And so what they would tell you is pick in those 3 lanes what you want, because what happens is your junior and senior year of college, you're competing on a merit list, and you rank what you want, and then one day they just call you in and say, this is what you got. So that's how I really picked it, was I ordered what I wanted, and I came in a room one day, and they said, you got field artillery, so that's what you're gonna do. So that's kind of how I came to be in the Army and the field artillery officer.
Thank you. Jeff, did you want to?
Oh, just my love of and desire to be a fighter pilot, to fly airplanes. Most of the services have an aviation component, whether that's Army, Coast Guard, Navy, Marines, Air Force. I just happened to land on the Air Force.
Excellent. Jill, could you spend just like 20 seconds maybe on Flag Day, like how Foreign Service officers are given their assignments? I think that's maybe interesting for the group.
Yeah, so again, there's the Foreign Service and the Civil Service. I was in the latter, but Foreign Service officers, diplomats who spend periods of time overseas, go through intensive pre-training and kind of it's Foreign Service 101 is kind of like the pre-training course, and then they kind of like when you finish medical school and you're given you kind of told which hospital you're going to go work at. Foreign Service officers attend this ceremony called Flag Day, where they find out where their first posting is going to be, and are given the flag. You want, Andrea? Maybe you can answer this.
They call your name and a flag comes up on the
flag,
screen
yeah.
and they hand it to you, and that's where you're going to live the next 1, 3, 5 years.
You pick up everything. They can put all of your kind of belongings in a ship container, and you're going abroad for a period of time. And if you have a family, your kids, family has to find a school. It might be an international school, and kind of everybody's life is changed in a minute.
Any last quick question? We'll take one last one here.
I was wondering, what was the hardest thing you had to do in your training to get to the place where you really wanted to be? Like for you, like in being a fighter pilot, or for you like actually like getting to serve. What was the hardest thing to do to get there?
Yeah, please, Jeff.
It's hard to say. There's so many components. You know, they put you in a centrifuge and they spin you up to 9 Gs. That's kind of hard, but it doesn't last very long. Lots of studying, lots of training, flying simulators. I don't know. It's all hard, but it's worth doing and very rewarding.
I'd just say quickly that the hardest thing for me was probably out in Death Valley, California. We have a place called the National Training Center where we can simulate what it's like to deploy. And so you take your entire unit out there, and it's almost like you're going to Iraq or Afghanistan. That's what it's supposed to feel like. But what they have are a lot of observer controllers, what they call them. And you show up, I was a platoon leader, and they give you missions, and they grade you. And so that whole time they're looking at how well you do, and that determines kind of how ready you are to actually deploy. And you do that at every level. You fight your platoon, and then with your companies, and then with your battalions and brigades and divisions. So that is a real test, because you're gonna be out there 2 or 3 weeks, you're not showering, it's work every day, it's supposed to be the real thing. And so you've really got to perform at your best, and that's when you can really tell if your soldiers have bought into you and if you've bought into them, and a predictor of how well you're going to perform in this time.
I would say, it's kind of piggybacking on what you're saying, the training, like there's just so much training, it's ongoing, and we would also do exercises where you would pretend that you're going to war. So just at your regular duty base, you'd perform exercises, and they're usually, often they were, 3 to 4 days. You have to, it's 12-hour days at least. When the sirens go off, they say don your gas mask, your chem warfare training material. So I put on full gas mask, chem warfare, and you're out there, like you're going to war. And, at different times you're like, not you, but I was like, man, I don't know if I signed up for this. But, you gotta be prepared. I remember being in Saudi Arabia, and as soon as we hit the ground when we hit the ground in Saudi Arabia, they were already in exercise, and it was 120 degrees literally in the shade. And it's also fun because you're out there and you're pretending but this is real world practice for if you do go to war. But for us, we would just try to make it as fun as possible. We would take off running, jump in the bunkers. It's hot as could be, and there were times when I'm sitting there, I'm going, my parents would not believe what I'm doing right now. And I kind of couldn't believe it either, but I was just like, I would take it in. As hard as it was, I would just internalize it and just be like, I'm never gonna get to do this again. This is so cool for like a minute. And I'm just gonna make it the best that I can. And kind of with every training, you're with your people, you get through it together, and it's constant, but all amazing experiences, really.
But what I will add is you may think about later, how do you simulate a war or fighting? And I'm not kidding, it's laser tag. So when you're all out there in the desert, everybody gets to wear. Do you know laser tag? Am I dating myself?
No, they play.
I was like, oh my god, I'm an old man. I just got older. But everybody gets to wear it. Your vehicles are wearing it, and that could be kind of it's a very serious thing, but that's a fun component of it if you're a kid like me.
So go home and tell your parents you have to go play laser tag this weekend. But it was amazing, and I hope, especially for the students in the audience, that you heard a lot of the components here today, the language, the cross-cultural education, just how important those skills were, to each of these roles as you think of and kind of discern what you all want to do after high school. Thank you so much again. Thank you to the school for putting this on. Just to make it human in the last moment. You have an incredible background of warfighters, Bronze Star recipients, people who served in really hard places. You're part of our ISI community, so thank you for doing that. But that also represents birthdays, weddings, funerals away from home, not seeing your family, holidays in really tough places, and just that sacrifice on a human level we appreciate as well. So I think please thank our panelists, and then I'll turn it over to Liz.
Jeff, Jill, Ashley, April, Andrea, thank you so much for your service to people here in the US and to so many people around the world. We are so grateful that you're willing to do all that you've done, get emotional, with your lives, but also that you're here with us today and that you're willing to share your stories. So thank you so much. Can we give them another round of applause?